Okay, good evening, everybody. Here it is Sunday. It looks like I am the only one here for now, but perhaps you'll be joining me soon, or maybe you'll watch this on the recording. Here we are, as I mentioned last week, and welcome you into our week 4 Zoom room. Last week I mentioned that when we met again, which is now, we will be halfway finished with the course, 50% finished. It sure does fly by, doesn't it? So we're starting week 4, we're finishing up week 3, and this is the second half of the course. So if you got a few assignments missing, please get those in soon. I don't have a lot of cushion time to accept those and to grade those. So please, it's not too late at this point, but you must get on track. Most of you, that doesn't apply. Most of you are up to date with everything. So keep that up. Because obviously that will impact your grade. If you're on time, you'll get a better grade, of course. If you do not submit assignments in a timely manner, then that obviously does impact your grade, as I am charged to do from my employer, CCC of Kansas. So we're going to talk this week a little bit about adolescence and the social and emotional development in adolescence, which is just, we could spend years studying this and investigating this and going over this, couldn't we? Sometimes for those of us who have teenagers or who have had teenagers or who work with teenagers, it makes us just want to pull our hair out sometimes, because they're hard, sometimes, not in all cases, but sometimes they're hard to understand and hard to help and hard to guide, if you will. Perhaps you work with them at school. My children are in their 20s now, so I've been through this. By the grace of God, I have no complaints. My kids, again, by the grace of God, never really gave us any reason to grieve or gave us any grief at all. And just thankful for every day that we have them, my wife Nina and I. And again, now they're, the other challenges of the 20s, which are, different things. But in the adolescent years, it's really tough, because they're, as you're going to see, they're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what group they, fit into, and they're trying to sort of learn how to be independent while they're, not quite ready to be independent all the way. So anyway, we're going to talk about these kind of things, and not to mention the physiological changes that go on with their body, and they're not children anymore. The hormones have kicked in and things such as that. So if you've ever been around teenagers, and I always point this out to parents when I'm working with them, sometimes they get aggravated with their kids and they want some parenting help and things such as that. And they just say, I can't understand, my child. Well, think about what it was like when you went through your teenage years. Have a real honest reflection with yourself and think about how it was and how challenging it was and the things that you went through. Certainly not easy, was it? So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I won't keep you on here very long. And you'll get a chance to watch this and get the meat of what's going on. And I'll share a Bible verse near the end, and you can share that and get your points. So, adolescence, social and emotional development. As I mentioned, the development of identity, this hits very much into what Erikson talks about. The person identity crisis, if you will. Who are they? In real life, you watch a bunch of kids in middle school, and they'll act a certain way with a certain group. They'll act a different way, even changing their say language. They're still speaking their home language, English, in most of our cases, but they're going to change their sort of vocabulary, if you will. They're going to make it more hip in some situations. They're going to make it a little bit more geeky in other situations, or a little bit more like a jock in situations. So that's just trying to figure out who they are, where they fit in. And part of the, I've said this a million times, and I won't give a lecture on this, but I argue the greatest of all human desires is the desire to be accepted. And now we need food, we need water, but I'm talking about a human desire. And I suggest that is the greatest one of those is to be accepted. So that's why we're going through this identity. Which group do I belong to? Am I going to be a ball player? Am I going to be in the band? Am I going to be a study whiz? Am I going to hang out with the troublemakers? So that's why they really need the parents to be there for them, and other caregivers as well. Yeah, identity development, we talked about with Erikson. these are great slides. I'm not going to go through each and every one of those, obviously, as I flip through these. Um, and this is a big deal today, gender identity. And at least in the media and sort of pop culture, if you will, there's been this sort of increase in people with gender identity disorder and gender identity dysmorphia. And it would seem in many ways that's on the increase, and perhaps it is. There are those who argue that it is only, it really hasn't increased percentage-wise. It's just that we're more aware of it now and we're more accepting of it now. And where we used to just kind of discount the kids that were going through this and label them something else, now we're starting to realize more and more of this as being an issue. It's a very hot political topic. It's a very hot topic in religions. I've done I'm not going to spend, this is a different lecture, but I will share with you. I've spent a fair amount of time as a professional studying this. The overwhelming majority of the scientific data in the scientific community believes that, kids can actually start to recognize this before 5. I have a hard time getting my mind around that. However, having said that, when I look at the data, I can see where they believe that. So having spent a lot of time as a professional and as a father and as a man who believes in the teachings of the Bible and Christian principles, my discernment, if you will, or the answers I've gotten from my prayers, and I'm not suggesting that I heard Jesus's voice or Jesus came and talked to me in person about this, but based on the wisdom that he's given me, the opportunities to listen to others that he's given me, the opportunity to read his word, I'm very settled in that my job is to promote acceptance and love, and stay completely away from judgment. There may be others who have different gifts and different guidance, and for them, I pray that they are able to follow that. But unless I get sort of different marching orders, my role is to be as compassionate and welcoming and be as good of an example of Jesus's love and acceptance as I possibly can, which I fail at naturally, but that's my lane, if you will. Perhaps that's one key piece in helping people with their struggles. I've worked with kids who have these issues, being gay and gender identity, feeling like they're a girl in a boy's body or a boy in a girl's body is the way it's so often described. And one of the things that they tell me is people ask them, why would you choose this? And they say, I would never choose this. I wish I didn't feel this way. I wish I didn't have these burdens. It would be so easy to sort of be what society wants me to be, but I can't, deny that I am attracted to this person, or I whatever have you. I went probably too far, further than that I intended to. But as we go through teenage years, we see more and more of this, and I'm not going to shy away from it necessarily. I'm not sure that it goes right along with our lecture tonight, but we did say that. I'll be happy to speak to others about that as well. Again, others may have different calling, and that's absolutely, if that's their calling, then that's their calling, if you will, in terms of preaching and teaching and helping others. But David Myers is a great Christian psychologist, and there's others. But he points out that some of the interventions, psychological interventions, and others we've put in place have not been helpful. So he's very well known. He's written a ton of textbooks. I'm not in his league at all. Never met the man, but he's on target, I think, with or at least he's in my lane, if you will. So anyway, we're going to move on from there as we look at going ahead. The self-concept is very important. As you're going through adolescence, you develop this, who am I? Again, that kind of fits in, which group do I belong to? Who am I actually? Am I a jock? Am I a geek? Am I a a thug? Am I a goth? Whatever the case may be. So knowing that and being comfortable with that is very important to teenagers. Okay, I want to get to okay, self-esteem. I speak a little bit about self-esteem from time to time in churches and things like that, and there are some in the Christian community that say, you know, self-esteem is unwelcomed, or it's kind of a devil's tool, because it's not about self, it's about God, and this is very true. But we do know that this thing that we call self-esteem, you can call it anything. People who measure high in self-esteem are typically happier. They typically serve others more effectively. They do better in their career. They are less prone to unhealthy behavior such as smoking, drinking excessively, overeating, things such as that. They tend to take care of themselves, get adequate sleep, things such as that as well. People with low self-esteem, they kind of feel like they're victims. They go through life with what we call an external locus of control, where people with high self-esteem have an internal locus of control, meaning they feel like they're responsible for their situation. People with what we call low self-esteem feel that others are to blame for their circumstances, or if something good happens to them, they feel that they were just lucky. They don't feel they had any impact on that whatsoever. So again, we just kind of call this self-esteem, but when you look at people with true, legitimate high self-esteem, they tend to be more serving. So, you know, what is self-esteem? First of all, some of the most notorious serial killers measured high self-esteem. They thought very highly of themselves. So there's a little bit of a problem there, obviously, probably more than a little bit. When you look at the biblical teaching of esteem, what we are to do is to esteem each other. If you have a group, and in the New Kingdom, it'll be this way, I'm convinced of it, where I'm not worrying about my self-esteem. I'm not looking myself in the mirror and saying, yes, I'm good. Yes, I did a good job. Yes, I'm capable. Yes, I'm worthy. And yes, people like me. You know, that's the kind of things that, they're not bad. I'm not saying anything negative about those kind of things. But if we spend that time esteeming others, and others spend that time esteeming others as well as us, none of us will have to worry about that, because we will be esteemed by others. And that's the biblical path to what we call self-esteem, this idea of feeling good about yourself, this self-efficacy and self-concept, if you will. Now, the problem is we live in a sinful world, so rather than all of us esteeming each other, some people try and tear other people down. And, you know, it's obviously getting worse, I think, in every aspect of our society. Certainly in the political realm, now, regardless of what side, if you're conservative or liberal or whatever the case may be, I think that you will agree, as most people do, that we're in a situation now where each side just tries to tear down the other side, which is a terrible thing. And it's not just politics. We see this in medicine. We see it in business. We see it in education, other facets of government. We see it in our churches, unfortunately. So, you know, if the two people running for a particular office, let's just say mayor, and each one is just disparaging the other one, well, if you win, what have you really won? For example, if Sue is running against Bob, and Bob only disparages Sue and Sue only disparages Bob, and let's say that Sue wins, well, if Bob was as bad as she says he was, how great is she? Like, anybody could have beat him if he's as bad as she said he was, right? So, you know, that goes out, and this is the opposite of what the Bible teaches us about how to care for each other, how to and esteem each other. We should love our brothers and sisters. So the point with self-esteem is this: let's say that we all get together just for a small group, and let's say there's 9 of us in this group, and we commit to just esteeming each other, not esteeming ourselves. And just imagine how that would be. We'd have a really nice group. We'd look for the best in each other. We would assume the best in each other. We would search out the strengths that each member had, each 9 members in this group had, or the other 8 members, I should say, and really promote that and speak highly of that. So, I mean, imagine that across society, and imagine how much better off we would be. Now, you can do that with groups. You can do that with organizations. Unfortunately, organizations tend not to do that as well. Like I said, businesses, I think are even getting more and more cutthroat, if you will. There's a lot of good going on in society. I don't mean to paint a doom and gloom thing. There's a lot of good going on, but in terms of self-esteem, I don't want us to get sidetracked on it. What this term of self-esteem is important. We want people with high self-esteem if we have a measurement of reported self-esteem, but the biblical way to get there is, I think, what is missing a lot. It, in and of itself, is not bad. The approach, rather than and self-affirmations, I'm not knocking them at all. In fact, I do believe in them. I do them myself from time to time, but more effectively, my self-esteem, and I feel better if we measure our self-esteem by how we feel about ourselves and our capabilities. My self-esteem is elevated when I esteem others, and you might want to try that. So anyway, I'm going to move on from self-esteem. Relationships, as adolescents go through those years. Let me see if anyone else joined us. I don't think so. Okay, you go through those years. That's key. And the relationship with the parents, I talk to parents about this all the time. When they're very young, especially the parents who are involved, and I don't necessarily mean helicopter parents. And a helicopter parent, if you don't know, is that parent that's always hovering over their child and won't let them make mistakes to figure things out and solve all their problems for them, and they know everything they're doing. Parents should know, but they shouldn't hover over their kids. It's a negative term, helicopter parents. You probably heard it. But when they get to adolescence, you do that, but you just kind of change your angle a little bit. You recognize that they can be a little bit more independent. You recognize that they are going to try and be more independent. You recognize that as you kind of break away from this childhood relationship with the parents to the adolescent relationship with the parents, there's a little bit of pain that goes with it because no one really has gone through that specifically as individuals before. And it's a little bit of pain. I equate it to giving birth. The fetus inside the mother comes out. There's a huge change there, right? I mean, for mother and child, and for father, for that in that matter. So the changes in adolescence aren't nearly that dramatic, nearly that quick, but they're in some ways the same because now the adolescent is becoming more of an independent person. Stephen Covey does a great job. He's a fantastic person. He's passed, but he wrote The 7 Habits. Hold on, try that again. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that's not why I'm talking about this, but within that, he talks about first we are dependent as babies. Then we go through adolescence and young adulthood, we become independent. In other words, as babies, we are dependent on our parents for everything as an infant, like for food or everything. We can't do anything on our own. The first, couple of years of our lives. And then that changes a little bit. And then through adolescence, we become independent. I can do this. I can cook my own meals. I can go out and get a job, make my own money. I can dress myself. I can wash myself. Then ultimately, though, we want to be interdependent. Dependent, independent, interdependent, which means we can care for ourselves, but we also care for others. And as even now, my children are in their 20s, and my son and I we have a very good, my daughter as well. Different though, right? My son and I, we're 2 men now. He's 25. So this relationship we have, like sometimes I depend on him for some of the things around the house. He still depends on me for certain things, but it's different. And it's a good thing. So this idea that relationship, it's tough. Parents are the ones who should be mature and take a step back. Give the child a chance to make some decisions, allow them to make some mistakes, if you will. In other words, don't rescue them because they have to learn how to recover from their mistakes, because if you don't learn how to recover from mistakes, you better never make one in your life. And that's obviously not how we go through life. So learning as an adolescent how to recover from mistakes while you're still safe and you're protected and it's going to be a smaller mistake is easier. and then you learn that lesson, because overcoming mistakes as an adult, it can be very, very challenging. So those are the main things I really wanted to hit. I think we talked about parenting styles last week. I won't revisit that. There's the authoritative, the authoritarian, the permissive, and the neglectful, essentially. And we talked about that last week, so I don't really feel a need to go through that again. But I will say to bear that in mind with your parenting style if you have adolescents or you're going to have adolescents. I know some of you are there, some of you have been there, and some of you are hoping to be there someday. So with that, I'm just going to let you go. I appreciate that if you watch this recording, and make sure you do go over the slides and the videos that you have every week and do some exploring. By all means, I'm here for you. Reach out if you have any questions through the message board, and I'll get back with you. Promise. I check that. Like I said, I check it several times a day, some more than others, but whenever I get a free moment, I just go in and check to see if anything's there, because I know that it's a little different when you're out there as a student, across the country. You want to make sure that you don't, that you're not left out, and you're part of the group. You're in my prayers, and I'm here to help you. So rather than just one scripture this week, I want to go with the 23rd Psalm, Psalms 23. That will be what you share with me in order to get your points for the video, for watching the recording, and you'll be awarded your 2 points if you send that to me in the message tab, Psalms 23. And you don't have to write down the whole thing, but I do suggest that you read it. Most people have read it many, many times in their life. I don't know how many times I've read it, but not nearly enough. What peace it brings. So I'm grateful. Thank you all. And I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. And I will see you in the course room.